The stars had been at peace for longer than most species could remember. At least that was what the Galactic Coalition called it. Peace, order, civilization. Commander Hyun stood at the observation window of Earth's orbital station, watching the blue planet slowly turn beneath him. He had been stationed here for 3 years, monitoring the silent watchers who monitored Earth. The aliens had been observing humanity for 2 centuries, never making contact, never revealing themselves. Hyun knew they were out there. Sometimes their ships appeared on the long-range sensors before vanishing again. Earth was considered too dangerous for contact, too violent, too unpredictable. Hyun understood why. Even now, 14 regional conflicts burned across the planet below. Humanity had never known true peace. They fought over resources, borders, beliefs, and sometimes just because old hatreds died hard. War was something humans understood in their bones. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. Captain Minho entered, his face tight with tension. "Sir, we have visitors," Minho said. "Real ones this time. They're requesting permission to dock." Hyun turned from the window. "They're making contact?" "Yes, sir. They say they have an offer for us." 2 hours later, Hyun sat across from Ambassador Thelvarian in the station's conference room. The alien was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. He moved with careful grace as if Earth's gravity was slightly too heavy for him. Admiral Yuna attended via video link from the Pacific Defense Fleet headquarters below. Thelvarian spoke in perfect English, though his voice had a musical quality that made it clear this was not his natural language. "We apologize for the deception of the past 2 centuries. The Coalition has been watching your world, waiting to see if humanity would mature enough for contact." "And have we?" Yuna asked from the screen. Her voice was sharp, direct. "That remains to be seen," Thelvarian said carefully. "But circumstances have forced our hand. The Coalition needs help. We need soldiers." Hyun leaned forward. "You're at war." "War." Thelvarian repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "Yes, though perhaps not as you understand it. The Viscari Dominion has been expanding into Coalition space for 2 years. They have taken 12 systems. Our projections suggest they will continue their advance toward the core worlds." Minho pulled up a star map on the wall display. The Viscari territory appeared in red, a growing stain spreading across the galactic arm. "How many ships do they have?" "Fewer than the Coalition," Thelvarian admitted. "But they are more aggressive than previous opponents. They push when others would negotiate. They refuse reasonable surrender terms. The Council believes they may push all the way to Sol if not stopped." "To Earth?" Hyun felt his chest tighten, eventually. "Which is why we are here. The Coalition is prepared to offer humanity full membership. Access to our technology, our trade networks, our knowledge. In exchange, we need your military support." Admiral Yuna's image leaned closer to her camera. "Why us? You said yourself we're too violent for your civilized galaxy." Thelvarian was quiet for a moment. "Because the Viscari are winning. They fight in ways we find difficult to counter. They are more aggressive than Coalition doctrine allows. We need forces who understand aggression." "You need attack dogs," Yuna said flatly. "I would not phrase it that way, but that's what you mean." Yuna smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You want us to do your dirty work." "We want allies who can match the Viscari's aggression," Thelvarian corrected. "The Council has studied your military history, your tactics, your persistence. We believe human forces could turn the tide of this conflict." Hyun pulled up files on his tablet, scanning through the data the Coalition had provided. Battle reports, casualty figures, fleet movements. Something felt wrong about all of it. "These casualty rates are tiny," he said slowly. "You've been fighting for 2 years and lost fewer ships than we lose in a single major naval battle." "We fight differently than you," Thelvarian explained. "War in the civilized galaxy is a calculated exchange. We use mathematics to determine victory probability. When the odds fall below acceptable levels, the losing side surrenders. There is no shame in this. It preserves lives and resources." Minho stared at the alien. "You surrender when the math says you'll lose?" "Of course. Why waste lives on a battle that cannot be won?" "Because sometimes the math is wrong," Minho said quietly. Thelvarian tilted his head. "Mathematics is not wrong. No, but it doesn't account for will, for determination, for refusal to quit." Minho glanced at Hyun. "We've won battles we should have lost by every calculation, and we've lost battles we should have won. War isn't just math. Then what is it?" Thelvarian asked. Admiral Yuna answered from the screen. War is what happens when math stops working. When two sides want something so badly they're willing to die for it. Your coalition fights like it's a business negotiation. The Viscari sound like they fight a little harder than that. But neither of you has seen real war. And you have? Humanity has never stopped fighting wars, Yuna said. We've been killing each other for thousands of years. We've perfected it. We've made it into an art form. If you want us to fight your war, you need to understand something first. What is that? When we fight to win, not to reach an acceptable outcome, not to minimize losses. We fight until the enemy cannot fight anymore. That's what war means to us. Thelvarian was silent for a long moment. Hyun could see the alien processing this information, trying to fit it into his understanding of how civilized beings behaved. Finally, the ambassador spoke. The council was warned that humans might be difficult to control. Then why come to us? Hyun asked. Because the Viscari are at our gates and we are losing. We need forces who understand how to fight without surrender being an option. Thelvarian stood, his movement still graceful despite the gravity. I will transmit the formal offer to your government. But I must ask Commander Hyun, Captain Minho, Admiral Yuna, if humanity joins this war, can you work within coalition command structure? Hyun exchanged glances with Minho. On the screen, Yuna smiled that cold smile again. We can take orders, Hyun said carefully. But if you want us to win this war, you'll have to let us fight it our way. And what is your way? You'll see, Yuna said. But I'll tell you this much, Ambassador. You think you know what war is? You think the Vescari are aggressive? You think this conflict is pushing the boundaries of civilized warfare? Is it not? No, Yuna said softly. You haven't seen war yet. You've seen armed negotiations. You've seen mathematical conflicts. But war, real war, is something else entirely. It's brutal. It's total. It's absolute. And once we show you what it looks like, your civilized galaxy will never be the same. Thelvarian looked at the three humans, and for the first time, Hyun saw something in those large dark eyes that looked like fear. I hope, the ambassador said quietly, that the council knows what it is doing. 3 weeks later, Earth's government voted to join the coalition. The recruitment began immediately. Humanity was going to the stars, and the galaxy was about to learn what war really meant. The Tarvos system sat on the edge of coalition space, a small colony world with 2 million inhabitants. For 3 weeks, the Vescari fleet had maintained a blockade around Tarvos Prime, cutting off supplies and demanding surrender. The coalition fleet arrived to break the siege, and for the first time, humans would fight alongside alien forces. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the battleship Incheon, watching the tactical display. 30 coalition vessels formed a precise formation ahead of her fleet. Behind her, 8 human ships waited. They were smaller than the coalition vessels, built for speed and close combat, rather than the long-range exchanges that coalition doctrine preferred. Coalition fleet is moving into position, Lieutenant Seojin reported from the tactical station. Fleet Marshal Corvin is broadcasting his challenge to the Vescari commander. Yuna listened to the translation. It was formal, almost ceremonial. Corvin stated his forces, demanded the Vescari withdraw, and warned that continued aggression would result in military action. It sounded more like a legal proceeding than a battle. The Vescari commander responded with equal formality. He stated his claim to the system, rejected the demand to withdraw, and calculated that his forces had a 62% probability of victory. Then the shooting started. The coalition and Vescari fleets exchanged fire at maximum range. Bright beams of energy crossed the dark space between the formations. Shields flared and absorbed most of the damage. Targeting computers calculated firing solutions with mathematical precision. Ships maneuvered in careful patterns, maintaining optimal range and formation integrity. It was, Yuna thought, the most polite battle she had ever seen. This is warfare? Captain Minho asked from his position at the communications console. He had transferred to Yuna's flagship for this engagement. They're barely scratching each other. They're following the rules, Yuna said. Watch the casualty counters. Every time a ship takes critical damage, it withdraws from formation and signals surrender. The other side stops targeting it. That's insane. That's civilized warfare. Yuna studied the tactical display. The battle had been going on for 20 minutes, and only 2 ships had been lost, one from each side. At this rate, the engagement would last hours before anyone had a decisive advantage. "Admiral, Fleet Marshal Corvin is ordering us to move into support position Beta 7, Seojin reported. "We're to provide covering fire for his left flank." Yuna looked at the suggested position. It would place her ships at the edge of the battle, firing at long range, playing by coalition rules. She made a decision. Negative. "Tell Marshal Corvin that we're implementing attack pattern Viper." Minho turned to stare at her. "Admiral, that's not in coalition tactical doctrine." "No, it's not." Yuna opened the fleet-wide channel. "All human vessels, this is Inchin Actual. We're going in hot. Reactor cores to maximum output. Target their command ships. Get close and hit hard. Show them what a real fight looks like." The 8 human ships broke formation. They accelerated hard, pushing their engines beyond what coalition safety regulations allowed. Alarms blared warnings about reactor stress, but the crews ignored them. The human vessels were smaller and faster than the coalition ships, and now they used that advantage. Yuna's fleet dove into the gap between the 2 main formations, approaching the Veskari line at attack speed. The Veskari ships, confused by this violation of tactical doctrine, hesitated. Their targeting computers were calibrated for long-range formation-based warfare. They struggled to track fast-moving targets at close range. The human ships opened fire. Their weapons were different from coalition energy beams. Humans used missiles, railguns, and plasma cannons designed for close combat. The Veskari shields, optimized for deflecting long-range energy weapons, proved less effective against kinetic impacts and explosive warheads. "Target their command carrier," Yuna ordered. "All weapons, continuous fire." The Incheon and 3 other human ships focused their fire on the Veskari flagship. Missiles slammed into its shields in rapid succession, overloading the generators. Railgun rounds punched through weakened sections. Within minutes, the massive carrier was venting atmosphere and listing to one side. "They're signaling surrender," Seojin reported. "The Veskari flagship is—" "Ignore it," Yuna said.
"Keep firing."
"Target their reactor cores, Admiral?" Seojin's voice was uncertain. "We studied the files, Lieutenant. The Veskari have broken surrender agreements 7 times in the past year. They signal surrender, regroup, and attack again. We're not giving them that chance." The Incheon's missiles struck the carrier's reactor section. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. On the Coalition command channel, Fleet Marshal Corvin's voice was sharp with shock. "Admiral Yuna, you violated surrender protocol. That vessel had yielded." "That vessel was still a threat," Yuna replied calmly. "Marshal, with respect, your rules don't win wars. They prolong them." 2 human destroyers, the Seoul and Busan, broke from the main group and accelerated toward a cluster of Veskari cruisers. Instead of engaging at range, they flew directly into the enemy formation. Colonel Doyen commanded the Marine detachment aboard the Seoul. His orders were simple: board the enemy vessels and disable them from within. It was a tactic the Coalition had not used in centuries. It was too dangerous, too costly, too barbaric. Doyen's Marines breached the hull of a Veskari cruiser using shaped charges. They fought through the corridors in close combat, using weapons designed to kill in tight spaces. The Veskari crew, trained for console-based warfare, panicked in the face of boarding actions. Within 15 minutes, Doyen's team reached the reactor control room. "Set the charges," Doyen ordered. "We're not capturing the ship. We're removing it from the battlefield permanently." "Colonel, our extraction window is tight," one of his Marines warned. "Then we better run fast." The Marines set explosive charges throughout the reactor control systems and sprinted back to their boarding craft. They launched just as the charges detonated. The Veskari cruiser exploded behind them, and the shockwave caught their small craft, sending it tumbling through space. Emergency thrusters stabilized them, but the craft was damaged. "Worth it," Doyen said, watching the debris field that had been an enemy cruiser. "Target the next one." On the Inchin's bridge, Yuna watched the tactical display transform. The Veskari formation was collapsing. 3 of their capital ships were gone, not surrendered or disabled, but completely destroyed. Their commander was sending frantic signals, trying to adapt to an enemy that didn't follow the rules. The Coalition fleet, still maintaining formation and firing at long range, was barely keeping up with the pace of human attacks. Marshal Corvin kept broadcasting orders for the human ships to fall back and regroup, but Yuna ignored him. "Captain Minho, open a channel to all Veskari vessels," Yuna ordered. Channel open, Admiral. Yuna spoke clearly. Veskari forces, this is Admiral Yuna of the human fleet. You have one chance to withdraw from this system immediately. If you remain, we will destroy every one of your ships. We don't accept surrenders. We don't take prisoners. We don't follow your rules. This is your only warning. There was a long silence. Then the Veskari fleet began to turn away from Tarvos Prime. Their retreat was panicked, disorganized, nothing like the calculated withdrawals of coalition doctrine. They fled. All human vessels pursue, Yuna ordered. Don't let them regroup. Admiral, Marshal Corvin is demanding you halt pursuit, Seojin said. He says the battle is won and further action violates engagement protocols. Tell the Marshal that we're not stopping until the Veskari are gone from this system. Yuna studied the fleeing enemy ships. They came here to conquer this world. They need to leave knowing they'll never try again. The human fleet chased the Veskari to the edge of the system. 2 more enemy ships were destroyed before the rest managed to jump to faster than light speed and escape. The battle had lasted less than an hour from the moment the human ships engaged. Tarvos Prime was saved. Back on the Inchin, Yuna received a transmission from Fleet Marshal Corvin. The alien commander's face showed an emotion Yuna was learning to recognize in coalition species. Profound disturbance. Admiral Yuna, your tactics were effective but completely unacceptable, Corvin said. You ignored surrender signals. You destroyed vessels that had yielded. You pursued a defeated enemy. These actions violate every principle of civilized warfare. Marshal, those actions saved Tarvos Prime and sent a message to the Veskari, Yuna replied. They thought they were more aggressive than the coalition. Now they know they're not the most dangerous force in this war. You showed them that humans are dangerous. No, Marshal, we showed them what real war looks like. Yuna gestured at the tactical display showing the debris field and the freed planet. Your civilized warfare was losing. Our uncivilized warfare just won. If that bothers you, then maybe you should have stayed peaceful. Corvin was silent for a moment. The Council will hear of this. I hope they do, Yuna said. Because if you want us to help you win this war, you need to understand something. We fight to win, not to look civilized while losing. The transmission ended. Mingo turned to Yuna with concern on his face. Admiral, we might have just made an enemy of the coalition. Maybe, Yuna agreed. But we definitely made an enemy of the Veskari. The news of Tarvos spread through the galaxy faster than the human fleet could travel. Within days, every species in the coalition knew that the new allies fought differently. Within weeks, the Veskari knew it too. Within months, that knowledge began to change everything. Captain Jisoo sat in the cockpit of her fighter waiting for the launch order. Around her, 11 other human fighters were docked in the carrier Daegu's hangar bay. They were small craft, barely large enough for one pilot and a basic weapons load. Coalition fighters were 3 times the size, equipped with shields, life support systems that could sustain a pilot for weeks, and enough automation that the pilot was almost a passenger. Human fighters were different. They were fast, maneuverable, and cheap to build. The pilot sat surrounded by weapons, engines, and very little else. Life support was minimal. Shields were weak. If something went wrong, the pilot had maybe 2 minutes to fix it or eject. All fighters, this is flight control, a voice crackled over the radio. Veskari squadron approaching from grid 772. Coalition fighters are engaging but taking losses. You're cleared to launch. Jisoo's hands moved over the controls, bringing her fighter to life. Tiger Squadron, form on me. We're going hunting. The 12 fighters launched from the Daegu and accelerated toward the battle. Ahead, Jisoo could see the flashes of combat. Coalition fighters were engaging a Veskari squadron in the typical pattern. Long-range shots, careful maneuvering, calculated risks. 3 coalition fighters were already limping away from the fight, damaged but not destroyed. Tiger Squadron split into pairs. Jisoo ordered, "Get close and hit fast. Don't give them time to target you." The human fighters scattered and dove into the Veskari formation at full speed. Jisoo's fighter screamed past a Veskari craft, her guns tearing into its wing. She didn't slow down to confirm the kill. There wasn't time. Another enemy fighter was already turning to target her. She pulled hard on the controls, her fighter spinning in a direction that would have torn apart a coalition craft. The G-forces crushed her into her seat, but the lighter human fighter could handle it. The Veskari pilot tried to follow, but his larger, heavier craft couldn't match the turn. Jisoo came out of the spin behind him and fired. The Viscari fighter exploded. 2 down, she reported. Tiger 3, you've got one on your tail. I see him, her wingmen replied. Can't shake him. Don't shake him. Lead him to me. Tiger 3 flew straight toward Jisu's position, the Viscari fighter following close behind. At the last second, Tiger 3 rolled aside. Jisu fired directly into the pursuing craft's path. It had no time to evade. 3 down. The battle lasted 8 minutes. When it was over, the Viscari squadron was gone. Tiger Squadron had lost 1 fighter, but the pilot had ejected and was recovered. The Coalition Squadron had lost none, but 4 of their fighters were too damaged to continue combat operations. Back on the Daegu, Jisu removed her helmet and found several Coalition pilots waiting in the hangar. They stared at her and her squadron with something between awe and horror. You flew directly at them, one Coalition pilot said. His species had blue skin and 4 arms. You could have collided, could have, Jisu agreed. Didn't. But the risk is part of combat. Jisu headed toward the debriefing room. If you're not willing to take risks, you'll lose every fight to someone who is. On the ground, the war was changing too. Major Yunji stood in the command bunker on Keras 4, studying the tactical map. Her battalion was dug in on the northern continent, holding a supply depot that fed 3 coalition armies. The Viscari wanted that depot badly enough to commit 5 full battalions to take it. The math was simple. Yunji had 800 soldiers. The Viscari had 4,000. Every calculation said she should surrender or retreat. Coalition Command had even sent authorization for withdrawal. Yunji had ignored it. Major, they're beginning their assault, Lieutenant Seojun reported. He had transferred from fleet service to ground forces, preferring the direct nature of infantry combat. 3,000 soldiers advancing on our position. Let them come, Yunji said calmly. Have all squads confirmed their firing positions? Yes, ma'am. Ambush points Alpha through Delta are ready. The Viscari advance was textbook perfect. They moved in formation, using their superior numbers to sweep across the terrain. They expected the humans to retreat or surrender. They expected coalition-style warfare. They got something else. The first Viscari unit walked into a minefield. Explosions ripped through their formation. Before they could recover, human soldiers opened fire from concealed positions on 3 sides. The Viscari tried to return fire, but they couldn't see their attackers. Humans had learned centuries ago how to hide, how to use terrain, how to fight from ambush. They're pulling back, Seojun reported. They'll regroup and try again, Yunji said. Rotate positions. I want Alpha and Bravo teams to fall back to secondary positions. Charlie and Delta hold and harass for 3 weeks, the pattern repeated. The Viscari would advance. The humans would ambush them, inflict casualties, and withdraw before the enemy could bring their superior numbers to bear. At night, human special forces teams raided Viscari camps, destroyed supplies, and vanished before dawn. The Viscari commander tried everything. He brought in artillery. The humans had dug their bunkers too deep. He sent in assault teams. They got lost in the forest and were picked off by snipers. He tried to surround the depot. The humans had prepared escape tunnels and underground supply routes. By the end of the 3rd week, the Viscari had lost 1,200 soldiers. Yunji's battalion had lost 43. The math no longer made sense. The Viscari commander, facing an enemy that refused to surrender despite impossible odds, did something unprecedented. He withdrew. Coalition High Command called it a miracle. Yunji called it basic infantry tactics. But across the galaxy, Viscari soldiers began to hear stories about the humans on Keras 4. Stories about warriors who fought from shadows, who never surrendered, who turned every battle into a nightmare. In the Coalition Council chambers, the debate raged. Ambassador Thelvarian, who had brought humans into the war, was defending their tactics against a chamber full of concerned delegates. They violate every principle of civilized warfare, one delegate argued. They fight without honor, without rules, without any sense of proportionality. They win, Thelvarian replied simply. The Viscari have not taken a single system since human forces joined the war. They have withdrawn from 3 systems they previously held. Whatever we think of human tactics, they are effective. Effective is not the same as acceptable, another delegate said. We have reports of human soldiers continuing to fight with terrible injuries. We have reports of human pilots using their own craft as weapons when ammunition runs out. We have reports of human commanders smiling while giving orders that will cost lives. Commander Hyun, attending the council meeting as a human liaison, stood to address the chamber. Council members, may I speak? The council leader gestured permission. You invited humanity to help with a war you were losing, Hyun said. You wanted our aggression, our willingness to fight, but you wanted us to do it your way, following your rules. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? A delegate demanded. War is not a game with rules. It's survival. You fight to win or you don't fight at all. Hyun looked around the chamber. My species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned things. Terrible things. Things we wish we didn't know, but we know them, and that knowledge is why we win. And what have you learned? The council leader asked quietly. That the side willing to pay the higher price usually wins. That honor doesn't stop bullets. That sometimes you have to be more frightening than your enemy. Hyun paused. You wanted us to scare the Veskari. We're doing that. But in the process, we're scaring you too. The chamber was silent. Yes, the council leader admitted. You are. Then you have a choice, Hyun said. Send us home and try to win this war yourselves, following your civilized rules while the Veskari break them. Or accept that we fight differently and let us end this war. The vote was close, but ultimately the coalition decided to allow human forces to continue their operations. The cost of victory was disturbing, but the cost of defeat was worse. Lieutenant Seojun, now serving as a tactical instructor at coalition headquarters, gave a presentation to a room full of alien officers. He spoke about asymmetric warfare, about guerrilla tactics, about psychological operations. The alien officers listened with growing discomfort. But these tactics are dishonorable, one officer protested. They work, Seojun replied. The Veskari are learning to fear human forces. Their soldiers hesitate before engaging us. Their commanders think twice before advancing. Fear is a weapon, and we use it. Is there anything humans won't do to win? Another officer asked. Seojun considered the question carefully. Yes, we won't lose. Everything else is negotiable. In Veskari space, the War Council met in emergency session. Reports poured in from the front lines. Human forces were small in number but devastating in effect. Veskari soldiers were requesting transfers rather than face human units. Some were deserting entirely. The Veskari Emperor listened to the reports with growing concern. His empire had expanded for decades, conquering system after system. The Veskari Dominion's response to human tactics was predictable. If humans fought without rules, then the Veskari would do the same. If humans used aggression and fear, then the Veskari would be more aggressive and more frightening. They would learn from their enemy and beat them at their own game. It was a fatal mistake. Captain Taeyang commanded the destroyer Indomitable, a ship that had seen more combat in 6 months than most coalition vessels saw in a decade. His crew was tired, his ship was battered, but they were still fighting. They were always fighting. Captain, we're receiving a distress call from Harmony Station, the communications officer reported. Veskari fleet inbound. 50 capital ships. Taeyang studied the tactical display. Harmony Station was a major coalition hub, home to 3 million beings and the coordination center for the entire sector's defense. 50 Veskari capital ships could destroy it in hours. What's our fleet strength at the station? Taeyang asked. 12 coalition vessels and 8 human ships. The math was brutal. 20 ships against 50. Every calculation said Harmony Station would fall. Admiral Yuna was there coordinating sector operations. If the station fell, the entire coalition defense network would collapse. Set course for Harmony Station, Taeyang ordered. Maximum speed. And send a message to engineering. I need them to do something crazy. In engineering, Lieutenant Minho received Taeyang's request and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. He wants us to overload the reactor, Minho said. Not just push it past safety limits, but actively overload it? That's what the captain ordered, the engineering chief confirmed. He says we need maximum power for a short burst. Maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes at overload will destroy the reactor, probably destroy the ship. The captain knows that. Minho was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he began running calculations. We can do it. We'll burn out half the power systems, but we can give him 5 minutes of power that'll make this ship perform like nothing the Veskari have seen before. And then we hope we're still alive to deal with the problems. The Indomitable reached Harmony Station as the Veskari fleet was beginning its assault. The coalition ships were evacuating civilians, trying to save as many lives as possible before the inevitable fall. The 8 human ships, including Admiral Yuna's flagship, were forming a defensive line. Taeyang opened a channel to the Admiral. "Ma'am, Indomitable reporting. We're ready to join the defense." "Negative, Captain," Yuna replied. Her voice was calm despite the impossible situation. "I'm ordering all human ships to cover the evacuation. We'll buy time, but this station is lost." "With respect, Admiral, I have another idea." "I'm listening." Taeyang explained his plan. There was a long silence. "That's insane," Yuna finally said. "You'll destroy your ship." "Maybe, but we'll take a lot of them with us. And we'll give you time to finish something I suspect you've been working on." Another pause. Then Yuna laughed. It was the first time Taeyang had heard her laugh during combat. "You've been reading our engineering reports," she said. "I've been paying attention, ma'am. Colonel Doyen and his teams have been working on station systems for weeks. I'm guessing it's not routine maintenance?" "No, it's not." Yuna's voice became serious. "Captain, if you're going to do this, you need at least 30 minutes. Can you buy us that time?" "We'll buy you 40. The Indomitable accelerated toward the Veskari fleet at attack speed. In engineering, Minho watched the reactor readings climb into red zones and keep climbing. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship, but the crew ignored them. "Reactor at 140%, Minho reported. "Power output exceeding theoretical maximums. We have 4 minutes before catastrophic failure." "That's 4 minutes more than they expect," Taeyang said. "Target the Veskari flagship and fire everything." The Indomitable hit the Veskari formation like a missile. Its weapons, powered by the overloaded reactor, tore through shields that were designed to withstand normal weapons fire. The ship's speed, pushed beyond safe limits by the extra power, made it nearly impossible to target. Taeyang's destroyer carved a path through the Veskari fleet, destroying 2 cruisers and crippling the flagship before the enemy could respond. Other human ships followed his lead, pushing their reactors beyond safe limits, taking risks that made coalition captains watch in horror. On Harmony Station, Colonel Doyen watched the battle from the engineering control room. Around him, his team was making final preparations. "How long until we're ready?" Yuna asked. 10 minutes, Doyen replied. "Maybe less if we skip some safety checks." "Skip them?" "The Veskari won't wait for us to be careful." Doyen and his engineers had spent the past weeks turning Harmony Station into something it was never designed to be, a weapon. They had rewired the reactor grid, repositioned the power distribution network, and prepared everything for a single catastrophic overload. If it worked, the station would explode with the force of a small star, taking everything nearby with it. If it didn't work, the station would still explode, just less effectively. "All personnel are evacuated except essential crew," Doyen reported. "We're ready to initiate on your order." Yuna watched the tactical display. The Indomitable was still fighting, impossibly still alive despite the damage it was taking. 3 other human ships had been destroyed, but they had taken down 7 Veskari vessels. The math was shifting, but not fast enough. "Captain Taeyang, how long can you hold?" Yuna asked. "Reactor is failing," Taeyang replied. His voice was strained. "We have maybe 2 minutes. Then we're done. That's enough. All human ships fall back to evacuation point Delta. Maximum speed. Don't wait for anyone." "Admiral?" Taeyang sounded confused. "That's an order, Captain. Get your people out of here. You've bought us the time we needed." The human ships broke off their attacks and accelerated away from the station. The Veskari fleet, sensing victory, pressed forward. Their ships surrounded Harmony Station, preparing for the final assault. The Veskari commander broadcast his triumph. "Coalition forces, your station is lost. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war." "You're right," Yuna replied. "The station is lost, but not to you." She nodded to Doyen. He pressed a button. Harmony Station's reactor grid overloaded in a carefully controlled cascade. The explosion started at the core and spread outward in a wave of energy that consumed everything within 20 kilometers. 17 Veskari capital ships were caught in the blast. They had no time to react, no time to escape. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away. When the light faded, Harmony Station was gone. A debris field marked where it had stood, but so was a third of the Veskari fleet. The remaining ships, shocked and demoralized, retreated in disorder. Yuna's flagship limped toward the evacuation point, damaged but functional. Around her, the surviving human ships were in similar condition. They had lost 4 ships and a major station, but they had broken the Veskari assault. Casualties? Yuna asked. 4 ships destroyed. 800 personnel lost. The station crew all evacuated successfully. The tactical officer paused. Admiral, Captain Taeyang is reporting his reactor has failed. The Indomitable is dead in space. Send recovery ships. I want every survivor picked up. 3 hours later, Taeyang stood on Yuna's bridge, his uniform scorched and his face tired. Admiral, I should probably be court-martialed for destroying my ship. Probably, Yuna agreed. But first, you're going to explain your thinking to Coalition Command. They need to understand what you did and why it worked. What I did was reckless, and what you did was necessary. You pushed your ship beyond its limits because the alternative was losing the station and everyone on it. That's not recklessness, that's calculation. Yuna gestured at the debris field on the tactical display. We lost a station, but we saved 3 million lives and destroyed a third of the Veskari's reserve fleet. By Coalition standards, that's a victory. By our standards, it's just Tuesday. Taeyang smiled slightly. Do you think they'll understand? No, but they'll accept it because we're winning their war for them. In the Veskari Empire, the news of Harmony Station's destruction arrived like a hammer blow. The Veskari Emperor stared at the reports, reading them again and again, unable to believe what he was seeing. They destroyed their own station, he said slowly. They turned it into a weapon and destroyed it. Yes, Majesty, his military advisor confirmed. The humans evacuated their personnel and then detonated the station's reactors. The explosion destroyed 17 of our ships. They weaponized a space station. The Emperor's voice was hollow. What kind of species does that? A species that fights to win at any cost. The Emperor stood and walked to the window of his palace, looking out at the stars. His empire had conquered dozens of systems. His armies had never known defeat until the humans arrived. We made a mistake, he said quietly. We thought we could fight them like we fight the Coalition. We thought we could match their aggression, their willingness to take casualties. But we were wrong, Majesty. The Coalition fights for resources and territory. They'll surrender when the math says they've lost. We fight for expansion and glory. We'll retreat when the cost becomes too high. The Emperor turned to face his advisor. But the humans? They fight like every battle is their last. They fight like losing is not an option. They fight like the entire universe depends on them winning. The message arrived at Coalition headquarters 3 days after the destruction of Harmony Station. It was addressed to the Coalition Council, but it specifically requested the presence of human representatives. The Veskari Dominion wanted to talk about peace. Commander Hyun sat in the conference room on Coalition headquarters station, watching Ambassador Thelvarian read the Veskari message for the 3rd time. The alien's face was difficult to read, but Hyun had learned to recognize confusion when he saw it. They want a ceasefire, Thelvarian said slowly, not with the Coalition. With humanity specifically. They're afraid of us, Captain Minho said from across the table. He was attending the meeting as a military advisor. They've realized they can't win. But the Coalition has more ships, more resources, Thelvarian protested. By every calculation, we should be the primary concern. Your calculations don't include fear, Admiral Yuna said. She appeared on the video screen, broadcasting from her flagship. The Veskari aren't afraid of losing ships or territory. They're afraid of fighting an enemy that doesn't know how to quit. The Coalition Council convened an emergency session. The vast chamber was filled with representatives from 47 different species, each one trying to understand what this development meant. In 2 years of war, the Veskari had never requested peace. Now, after 6 months of fighting humans, they were ready to negotiate. The council leader, a being whose species was so old they had forgotten their home planet, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. The Veskari are offering a ceasefire. They will withdraw from contested systems. They will pay reparations. They will sign non-aggression treaties. But they have one condition. What condition? A delegate asked. They want assurance that human forces will be restrained. They want the Coalition to promise that humanity will not expand into their territory. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates saw this as victory. Others saw it as admission that humanity had become as dangerous as the Veskari. A few saw it as proof that inviting humans into the war had been a terrible mistake. Commander Hyun stood to address the council. May I speak? The chamber fell silent. You invited my species to help with a war you were losing, Hyun said. We helped. The war is ending. The Viscari are offering peace. This should be a moment of celebration. Yet you sound uncertain, the council leader observed. Because I know what you're thinking. You're wondering if you've traded one threat for another. You're wondering if humans are now more dangerous than the Vescari ever were. Hyun looked around the chamber. You're wondering if you made a mistake. No one denied it. Here's what I can tell you, Hyun continued. Humans don't want your territory. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We want what we've always wanted, to be left alone to build our lives. But we've learned through thousands of years of fighting each other that sometimes peace requires strength. Sometimes the only way to be left alone is to be too dangerous to attack. That is a very aggressive philosophy, a delegate said. It's a survival philosophy, Hyun corrected, and it works. The peace negotiations took place on a neutral station at the border between Coalition and Viscari space. Captain Minho and Admiral Yuna represented humanity alongside Coalition diplomats. The Viscari sent War Prince Kaleth, a military commander who had fought human forces personally and survived. Kaleth was tall for his species, with dark scales and eyes that seemed too large for his face. He moved with the careful precision of a warrior who had learned to respect his opponents. I am here to negotiate peace, Kaleth said as the meeting began. But first I must understand, why do humans fight the way you do? What do you mean? Yuna asked. The Coalition fights to achieve objectives. We fight to expand territory. But humans fight like every battle is the end of the world. Your soldiers continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate any rational being. Your pilots use their own craft as weapons. Your commanders smile while giving orders that will cost lives. Kaleth leaned forward. I have seen human soldiers singing while charging into certain death. Why? Minho considered the question carefully. Because we've learned that sometimes survival isn't about logic. It's about will. If you believe you can win, if you refuse to give up, sometimes you survive even when you shouldn't. That is not rational. No, Yuna agreed. It's not. But rationality doesn't win every fight. Sometimes you need something beyond rationality. You need the absolute refusal to lose. Kaleth was quiet for a long moment. We came to these negotiations because we cannot defeat an enemy who treats death itself as an acceptable tactic. Every time we thought we understood your limits, you showed us you had no limits. We cannot fight that. Then don't fight it, Hyun said. Make peace instead. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The Treaty of Terra, as it came to be called, was unlike any peace agreement the galaxy had seen before. The Viscari agreed to withdraw from all contested systems. They agreed to non-aggression pacts with Coalition members. They agreed to reparations for the damage they had caused. In return, humanity agreed to something unprecedented. They would share knowledge with the Coalition, but not weapons. They would train Coalition forces in tactics and strategy, but not in total war. They would remain a defensive force, not an offensive one. Most importantly, there would be a buffer zone between human and Vescari space. Neither side would cross it without permission. It was a recognition that some boundaries should not be tested. This treaty has an unwritten clause, Kaleth said on the final day. Everyone in this room knows it, though we won't put it in the official document. What clause? The Coalition diplomat asked. That if the Viscari ever threaten Coalition space again, humans will return to this war, and next time we will not have the luxury of learning their tactics slowly. Kaleth looked directly at Yuna. You have taught the galaxy what total war looks like. That lesson cannot be unlearned. Good, Yuna said. That was the point. 6 months after the treaty was signed, Lieutenant Seojin stood in front of a classroom on Coalition headquarters station. 50 alien officers sat before him, representing 20 different species. They were there to learn from humanity's military experience. Today we're going to discuss asymmetric warfare, Seojin began. This is when a weaker force defeats a stronger one by using unconventional tactics. An alien officer raised one of his 4 arms. Why would we need such tactics? The Coalition has the largest fleet in the galaxy. Because someday you might face an enemy larger than you, Seojin replied, or an enemy who doesn't fight by your rules. The Viscari were smaller than the Coalition, but they were winning because they fought more aggressively. Humans are smaller than both, but we ended the war because we fought without limits. Without honor, you mean, another officer said. Honor is a luxury of the strong, Seojin said. When you're weak, when you're desperate, when survival is at stake, honor doesn't matter. Victory matters. Living to see tomorrow matters. Everything else is secondary. The classroom was uncomfortable with this truth, but they listened. They had seen what human tactics could achieve. They had seen the Veskari Empire, which had conquered a dozen systems, request peace rather than continue fighting humans. Major Yunji trained coalition ground forces in guerrilla tactics and defensive warfare. Captain Jisoo taught aggressive fighter maneuvers. Captain Taiyang lectured on reactor management and emergency operations. Across coalition space, humans were sharing knowledge that would change how the galaxy fought its wars. But they were careful. They taught defensive tactics, not offensive ones. They taught survival, not conquest. They showed the coalition how to protect themselves, not how to attack others. We're not teaching them to be like us, Hyun explained to Admiral Yuna during one of their regular meetings. We're teaching them to defend against threats like us. And if they use that knowledge to become aggressive themselves? Yuna asked. Then we'll already know their tactics, Hyun said with a slight smile. We wrote the playbook. On Earth, the war veterans returned home as heroes. They had fought in battles across a dozen systems. They had faced an enemy that outnumbered them and outgunned them. And they had won, not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior will. Captain Minho stood in front of a memorial on the Seoul station, reading the names of the fallen. 800 humans had died in the war. It was a small number compared to the casualties in humanity's own wars, but each name represented someone who had gone to the stars and never returned. Do you think it was worth it? A young officer asked. She was too young to have fought in the war, part of the new generation that would serve in peacetime. We saved the coalition, Minho said. We ended a war that could have consumed the galaxy. We showed everyone that aggression has limits. He paused. Yes, it was worth it. But I hope we never have to do it again. In Veskari space, the Empire was changing. The defeat had shaken their confidence, but it had also taught them limits. They were still powerful, still ambitious, but now they understood that expansion had costs they might not be willing to pay. War Prince Kaleth became an advocate for peace, arguing that the Empire's strength should be used for defense rather than conquest. It was a controversial position, but he had seen human warfare firsthand. He knew what lay beyond the boundaries of civilized conflict,